Okay, so first of all, I would like to welcome everyone to Pragati E-Vichar Literature Festival's Authors Marathon. And today we have been joined by two lovely panelists, Miss Varunika Rajput and Miss Ida Pajunen, for a session on the topic Women's Unyielding Spirit, Empowerment Through Resilience and Achievement. So before we begin with the session, I would just like to quickly introduce both of our panelists for the day to the listeners. So first of all, we have Ms. Varunika Rajput. Varunika Rajput is the author of the ebook The Road to Redemption, and she has also co-authored the anthology Perfect Surprise. She loves to blog and frequently pens her thoughts on her personal blogging site by the name of the Lotus Flower Diary. She's also a popular blogger on the platform Momspresso and has earned for herself a special spot there through her simple and soulful write-ups. She bid adieu to corporate life early in her career and chose the field of education and has worked closely with several educational institutions, both as a management faculty and a communication and life skills trainer. Born and brought up in the quaint and picturesque town of Nainital, she has had a splendid and blissful childhood, and her that part of her childhood always finds a place in her stories. So, Miss Varonika, I would like to cordially welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so up next we have Miss Ida Pajunen. She is a writer and artist who holds a master's degree in gender studies from the University of Cambridge and another master's degree in traditions of yoga and meditation from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. She was awarded the title of Yoga Acharya, that is Master of Yoga, by the Shivananda Yoga Vedanta Center. She is the co-author of several Ghosh Yoga practice manuals and has worked to edit and publish historic manuscripts. She makes her home in Minnesota, USA, but travels around the world to teach practical yoga, history, and philosophy and perform music. She's a lifelong and award-winning violinist and vocalist. So, Miss Ida, I would like to cordially welcome you as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so now that we're all familiar with the panelists for the day, I would like to begin by asking the first question. So, my first question to both of you is, both of you have engaged in collaborative writing projects. How do you believe collaboration enhances the portrayal of women's stories, and how can it contribute to a broader empowerment narrative?
Would you like to begin? Go ahead.
You want me to begin?
Sure, if you'd like
to. No problem. Well, I think I genuinely believe that any collaborative writing project, any such exercise is an excellent way of mirroring our concerns. When I say our, I am talking about women in particular. And because our concerns, I feel, are far too many and they run deep. It's like these concerns are deeply entrenched in our society, its system, its culture, the way our families are. It's all there. I do feel that it's here I'd like to mention, like the proverb, one shoe does not fit all. So there are so many issues out there in the open that need to be addressed. I do feel that any collaborative writing exercise is a great way of, working towards a solution in this direction. Because in all fairness, uh, behind all these talks of women empowerment and, all these debates around women empowerment, equality, gender bias, I do feel that there are generations and generations of women who have lived their lives in oppression and trauma. So that's what I feel about any collaborative writing exercise.
Yes, certainly. I think we cannot know what others think and what their experiences are if we aren't open to listening and to collaborating with them. And so many things we would never think to consider, or we would never know about, they'd never come into our awareness unless we have, conversations and unless we listen to others. And on the other hand, there are so many things that are similar as well, that you start to see the themes of what people face, the difficulties, the joys as well, the triumphs, the whole sort of experience. You can see some common themes when we engage in collaboration, but certainly the struggle, the oppression, all of those things, and the perspective. Without some kind of collaboration or discussion, you know, we'll never know what we don't know for ourselves, and everyone has a unique situation, even if there are themes that affect many people, women in particular. Everyone has a unique experience. So through collaboration and bringing out as many voices as possible, we can really learn and grow to a much broader degree than just having our own perspective be the one that we're trying to push all of the time.
Absolutely.
Right. So moving on to the next question. The next question is, what inspired you to delve into writing, particularly exploring themes centered around women's empowerment? Can you share a brief overview of your journey as an author and how your personal experiences have influenced your writing on women's empowerment?
Should I go first on this one?
Yeah, please. I'm
okay, we can alternate. Okay. So, yeah, my journey is quite interesting to writing, especially to be writing a book about a woman in India. Clearly, I am not from India. So I came into this through a lot of very, you know, strange or fortuitous sort of things that happened. But as you heard from the introduction, I have been studying yoga for many years. And I eventually went to Calcutta in particular, and have since spent quite a lot of time there working on historical projects, in particular, some manuscripts that had never been published from the early 20th century. I worked to sort of edit those and publish those. And through those projects, I came to, you know, hear different stories about different figures throughout history, became more curious, made friendships, and all of those sorts of things. And that kind of pushed me forward into the project that I've been working on now, the book Strong Woman. And so all of that kind of went in some situation, some way. It's hard to really think about how I got to where I am now, but yeah, you know, one thing leads to the other, and you meet a lot of different people along the way. But I think the story in particular is one that I'm interested in, or this type of story about a female figure who was very powerful, very unusual in her time, had an incredible life story. These are stories that I'm always interested in, no matter where the people are, where they come from. I always love to hear people's life stories, because they're absolutely incredible, really every single person, what they've faced and what has happened. And so as I was working through the historical manuscripts and spending a lot of time in Calcutta, this story kind of, I suppose, really came to me. And I thought this kind of marries my interest in history and the story of a very interesting, fascinating woman in her time who did really incredible and unusual things throughout her life. And then what kind of pushed me into it is, as I started working on the project, and I would ask about Reba and her life, and you know, just try to see, like, do people know, people remember her, do they know of her? And anyone that was of an age where they would have seen her perform or heard of her immediately had such vivid memories of her life. And so that was really interesting to me, that no one had really written about her, nothing had really been explored to any significant level. Yet if you asked people, you know, in her neighborhood, they would remember her and her acts really specifically and really vividly. So I thought, this is someone who is living in people's memories, but there isn't something that sort of captures the life, you know, at least to some degree, that's out there. And so that kind of drew me into the project to a more serious degree. Varunika.
Yeah, so Thank you for sharing that, Ida. It's great to know that I am sharing this platform with you, who's come from such a different background. And, like you rightly said, that there is so much to learn from each other and, hear your side of the story. I mean, I think it's commendable that you've come from another country and you're working here on, issues of our Indian women. So kudos to you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm eager to hear your story.
Writing or becoming an author, honestly, never featured in my great grand scheme of things in life. I would like to uh, tell you that I come from a very small town called Nainital. It's a small hill station in Uttarakhand, and I was born and brought up there. And I received a very basic, humble, simple, education. My childhood, adolescent years, all was spent there, and it was a very humble, modest sort of upbringing that I have received. Very middle class. I was that 80s and 90s kid who was, always told that you are supposed to get educated and you're supposed to get yourself a job, either become a doctor or an engineer or something that equals that, and then you have to find yourself a man, which, I mean, you don't have to find, they will find for you. And then you'll get married, you have kids, you have a house, you buy yourself a car, and then all of that put together amounts to, a settled person uh, in life. So that's how I was brought up, and that's all that I saw around me. And so I finished my MBA, and post that I got into a couple of jobs, and I worked there in the corporate. Then I switched careers and got into the field of training and education, and cut to marriage, again, part of the original plan, where I'm married and I have kids. And it was during this time that I realized, after I had two kids, that I felt that whatever this whole plan was, it didn't work for me. I have it all on the outside, but on the inside, I was somewhere tearing apart. I felt that this deep sense of loss of identity, of self-worth, because all I was doing was eating, breathing motherhood in the last 1 decade. Cut to the pandemic, when I was with my children were very small then. Like, my elder one was 5, and my younger one was 3. And I'm married to a mariner, so he's sailing for most part of the time, and courtesy that I am almost like a single mother. So the whole situation was very overwhelming, and because with kids, without help and nobody to talk to, and at the same time you are handling so many different emotions of your children. They're very small, and you have to be there for them, and you have to handle the household work and uh, all of that, and keep yourself safe. So it's during that time in 2020 that I felt this huge, urge of connecting with the outside world, and sharing my side of the story. Or, I felt that I had so many anecdotes in life, and from life, and so many, feelings to share, stories to share. So I kind of stumbled upon a parenting platform called Mom Espresso, and I wrote my first blog there in 2020. And like Ida said, one thing led to another. One blog after the other, it started receiving a lot of appreciation, and people started talking about the blogs. And so I reached a point where couple of blogs received more than 1 million views, and they became conversation starters. So when that happened, I think it rang a bell then, and in my head, that there's something more to this, that I'm actually capable of doing much more And from there, I think I started participating in all these contests and short story contests, and I won a few, lost quite a few, and then wrote my ebook. And one morning, I woke up and I realized that so I'm the co-author of two books, two anthologies, and there is a blogging site that I have, and I'm also contributing to two other platforms. So I felt that the time is right, and I felt confident enough to write my first book. So my short story collection came out in 2022. Uh, so I started thinking on those lines in 2021, and 2022 it was there. And yeah, I think that's how everything happened, and probably it was just meant to be. And about why I write more about women is I just feel that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So it's just whatever I've seen, everything just came together. Nothing has been strategized or thought that yeah, this is relevant, or I must write about this. It comes very naturally to me. I think there is a lot that is still unsaid there. So yeah, that's my story.
I really like how both of you have such different stories, but as we were talking about earlier, every person has their own story to tell. And that becomes very evident from both of your answers. And it's just lovely to hear how both of you started and where you are right now. So yeah, I think we can move on to the next question now. So the next question is, so Ms. Varunika, your stories often draw from the Indian middle class experience, and Ms. Ida, your background in gender studies brings a unique lens to your writing. So how can literature rooted in specific cultural contexts contribute to a more inclusive and global conversation on women empowerment?
Uh, I'll go first, or Ida, would you
Sure.
like to?
Yeah,
Oh,
sure. Go ahead.
okay. So here I'd like to quote a book actually, which I read in the recent times. In fact, a couple of stories still remain. So there is a book called The Many That I Am. Maybe you've heard of it. So it's basically, the book is an assortment of stories, essays, reflections, and poems uh, coming from the state of Nagaland. Okay, it's from the Northeast. All those stories are based in, they come from Nagaland, and all contributors are women. So, so that is something that really struck me and stayed with me, uh, because even though there were so many women contributors there, you could see that there is a vision to this piece, and it was very evident that they all of them felt in some way that although there is an oral tradition of literature out there, you won't find too many pieces of literature from that part of the country, specifically by women. So I felt that it was very deeply rooted there, and and the strength lay there, that it was very raw and very real. And there were so many debutantes who had written their first poem or their first story in that book. And the sort of I felt that exposure or the spotlight that was put on them because of the book, I think it must have boosted their confidence in so many ways. Maybe uh, a few of them are on their writing journey now, post that. This book was published by Zuban Publications in association with a Japanese agency. So they've received a lot of appreciation and a lot of help in that regard. So I feel that you know projects like these, which are specific to cultures also, they are very, very important for women of our country, because you will find a lot of writers coming from Bengal, you'll find a lot of them coming from the down south, but from that part of the country, it's rare. So yeah, I feel that literature rooted in culture is very, very crucial to women empowerment.
Yes, I certainly agree wholeheartedly, and it's so lovely to hear your stories as well and your experience. One thing I noted when you were talking about your story and your evolution as a writer, as you said, you just thought, I'll write one blog and then a million people read it and it resonates. And I think those are the things that contribute to a global conversation. Is if you have different voices, it's actually a conversation. And so this idea of how can we have a more inclusive global conversation? Well, as Varunika says, you have to have other voices that bring out different experiences. Otherwise, it can't possibly be an inclusive or a global conversation. So I think without the voices of as many as possible, it's just simply isn't. It's lacking. It's one perspective, or it's a very could be male dominated perspective, or whatever other cultural powers that are dominating the conversation. And I think that the idea of gender studies is interesting to me, and especially in this context, because I didn't really set out to do this project as a gender project. This was a story of a remarkable person, that I had sort of heard inklings about and thought, wow, that's what a life. It's amazing to be a successful performer in the circus and do these incredible feats of strength. The first thing that I thought of wasn't necessarily this is a remarkable woman. It's a remarkable story. So I think in gender in this context, yes, it can be that this is the story about a woman, and that is still today surprising, that we have stories about women and then they get picked out as a gender project, when I think this is a story really that's just remarkable, like so many are. But then I also think of gender. So yes, it can be that this is a story of a woman, but I think of gender in terms of all the different sort of cultural forces that are at work to create situations and to create lives and to influence lives and influence situations. And even, Varunika was saying earlier about you had this sort of set of the jobs you needed, the family you needed, the husband, the children, that was already sort of predetermined. So I think of the study of gender sort of just as looking at what are those cultural forces that are already sort of predetermining what we're supposed to be doing or what our lives are supposed to look like. And then what happens, I guess, when that doesn't feel right, or we go against the grain, or something happens that doesn't fit in that narrative. So I'm interested in that more broadly. It doesn't even have to be gender. It can just be, what are the cultural forces that sort of make us think, oh, that is right, or that is normal, and that isn't. And where is that line? And importantly, also, who or what is always determining that? So the story that I've been working on about Reba's life, it was against the grain in many ways, because she was working in the 1950s. She was a woman. She was, the star of the performance ring, which was very unusual. And so all of that is kind of interesting to me. Why does that go against the grain, or why still today is this considered sort of an unusual story? And why isn't this just a story, in the way that it's interesting because it's unique, but it's not necessarily something that we pick out as different?
All right. So, moving on to the next question. Women's experiences vary across intersections of identity. So, how do your works acknowledge and explore the intersectionality of gender with factors like race, class, and cultural background?
You want me to
Shall I
take it up,
start?
please?
Okay,
Or
sure.
Ida, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to hear yours.
Okay, sure. Well, I mean, for me, in this context, it has had to be a very sort of separate endeavor. Like I have tried to approach this, I've had to approach this as someone who's an outsider in many ways. So what is, how can you learn about a culture? How can you think about a culture? How can you think about class dynamics or, factors of gender when you are not necessarily a product of that exact environment? And I think that that is sometimes a drawback for sure. There is a lived experience that you have when you live in a place and you're influenced by it. But so I do think it can be a drawback. I also think for me, sometimes it has been an asset in the sense that I have no choice but to look at it from a pretty, open mind, so to speak. That might be, open in a bad sense, but it's not conditioned by my own lived experience to the same degree. So I think that analyzing all those factors and intersectionality is a crucial thing to think about in any story, because we're not products of one sort of thing. It isn't just our position in society that's one singular thing. It's all of these things that are in conversation with one another. So when working on this project, I've tried to really think through as much as I can all of the different factors, or as many as I can, listen to people that have had a similar lived experience, try to be in conversation with them, and try to think about how these things affect what someone's life would be like. And I think now, thinking about my own sort of set of intersectional kind of things that are in conversation, it's interesting to sort of think what remains when it's gender, but it's in a different culture, or it's gender, but it's in a different place, in a different time. What happens with class dynamics in different locations? I mean, these are massive questions, but sometimes I think by really starting to think of it in one context, we start to see it in other contexts as well. So it's a fascinating and really rich and endless conversation about what is culture and how do the factors of culture influence people's lives, but a necessary conversation, though daunting.
Absolutely. And I so agree that this is a necessary conversation, and an endless one too. Especially like you come from such a diverse background, like which is I believe culturally different to ours, and to come at a point where you meet this culture, and look at it from that point, from that place. I think it's great. And I think as far as my work goes, I because I'm sticking to our Indian subcontinent here, from whatever I've observed, seen, and experienced, I do think that here in our country, it's when we say gender, for instance, it's it's like in that form you have this point of gender, it's male or female, and then you pick your gender, that I'm a male or I'm a female. But for us, I think we have to dig deeper, because gender, I feel that it's like a spectrum of roles and responsibilities, and the norms that our cultures and societies have considered for ages, appropriate to men and for women. So and the gap is huge. So a lot of my stories, in my book, in my short story collection, are looking into that, looking into this cause that is there. And say, for instance, there is a story from my book. It's called Ravan, and so it's based in Karnataka, and there is this young girl, teenager. She wants to go out to visit some festival, and her mother is not joining her in because she's going through her periods, you know. So in a lot of states and cities of India, it's like a big no, you know, where if you are going through your period, you are not to come close to anything that's religious. So she cannot accompany her, but she feels that, okay, because she's hit her puberty, she's vulnerable, you know, it's back of our mind, it's there. And so she instructs her son, who is younger to the girl, you know, and that, you know, you take care, and you accompany the girl. So the onus of protecting the girl, you know, that responsibility, that role has to be played by the boy, who's, you know, the man. And the girl cannot take care of herself. It is evident in the story, even though it's not the main, you know, the main theme or the plot of the story. It's like a sub theme, subplot. So I do feel all these roles and responsibilities that and expectations that our society has set out for us, and, you know, told us that this is how it is supposed to be. I have tried to touch that in my stories, through my stories, and I hope that even in future, whatever I write, it'll help you know, uncover a lot of these uh, deeper, you know, relevant issues.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. Both of you are contributing to a literary legacy. What impact do you hope your work will have on future generations in terms of shaping attitudes towards women and their potential? Also, what advice do you have for aspiring writers who wish to contribute to the discourse on women's resilience and achievement through their work?
Ida, I like
Okay,
to
sure. Okay, sure. I think for me, it's somewhat simple, which is that taking the story of even just one woman seriously is enough and is important. I think that, you know, until that is just kind of the norm, that yes, there would be a book about women's stories, and that wouldn't be, you know, any different than a book about men's stories. Until that's the case, I think that the important thing for me is that it's worth digging into one story or a collection of stories, to one voice, a collection of voices, and putting it out there. I think for much of history, and probably still even today, largely, that seems like it's not worth it. You know, the male voices are the dominant ones, and that's just not all of reality. You know, it's a very limited scope of reality and of history. So I think in terms of like how to approach this and what attitudes we can have, I think it's simple, just that it's enough to take a singular voice seriously, whoever that voice is, wherever they come from, whatever they look like, whatever their experiences have been. It's enough to take them seriously and to hear what they have to say. So I hope it's, you know, in essence, if there are more of those voices out there, more unique perspectives, more collections of unique perspectives, that becomes more normal, or that becomes more usual in a good way, that this is how we are in the world. We value the voices of many people. We listen to many different types of stories from different cultures, from different walks of life, and that isn't going against the grain in some way, that there isn't just one voice that we're supposed to hear, and then if there's something different, well, that's a weird, you know, that's a book about something odd, something different. That's just, and simply should just be another voice, another perspective. So I think it's really simple in that way, that everything we put our energy into and everything we sort of put our effort behind, we can make that singular statement that this was worth putting the effort in, and that this voice or this story was worth pursuing and was worth taking seriously. So I think that's, for me, the sort of simple way of looking at it, that is it worth taking seriously someone's voice? Yes, I think it always is. So then what is that story that they have, or what is that perspective that they have, and how can that be heard? And in literature and in writing, in blogging, in poetry, it's a very wonderful way to sort of capture perspective and viewpoint, and to pass it along, and to have it be read, or maybe not, but still have it be taken seriously.
Absolutely. I totally agree with what you say, and it's definitely about uh, putting a different perspective out there. So whenever I blog, for instance, it's the idea is very simple. I just want whoever the reader is to find a moment of joy and calm, and a certain perspective, some take home, when I'm blogging. But when I'm looking at it, at writing from the perspective of probably writing a book, or creating a piece of literature, I inevitably think about my own two uh, girls, So in terms of future generation, I'm raising one, so to say. So I have two daughters, and I do want them to read my books or my work whenever they grow up, which they constantly keep telling me that, are we ready to read the book? Like, especially my elder one. So I tell her, no, probably when you're 15 or 16. So I look at it from that point of view, that I know that they will read it one day. And when that day comes, it's very important for me that my daughters, they understand that what their mother's work stood for, and it should help them in develop a sort of confidence, and you know a sort of it should be a motivating and guiding factor for them, to lead their life as well. So that is something that I truly, think about a lot whenever I'm writing or working on a story which is related to women. And having said that, yes, there are so many voices out there who are writing, continue to write, and will be writing in future as well. And I believe that if you want to write about women empowerment, or help in a certain way, then you must dig into issues by focusing on two very important things, that is uh, human dignity, and full participation in the society, like totally there, equally. And when I'm saying equally, I'm not saying like some mathematical equation, that you have to prove a point to the other gender, for that matter. I'm saying that underlying all this talk is the right for an equal concern, right for respect and consideration. So the right to education and occupational attainment. So any sort of writing in this direction should help that. It should help in skill building. It should help in social inclusion. So that is my take on this. I believe that literature is a great tool to develop a sense of self-worth in women in the Indian subcontinent in particular.
Your girls will be very lucky to read your work when they're old enough.
I hope so.
That's so lovely.
Yeah. So these were some of the questions that I had for both of you. Now I have two more questions to go, and they're directed at each one of you specifically. So I would first ask the question to the person who it is addressed to, and then if the other person wants, they can definitely give in their opinions as well. All right. So the first question is for Ms. Varunika. So the question goes, your stories often revolve around the lives of Indian middle class women. What unique challenges and triumphs do you believe characterize the experiences of women in this socio-economic context?
Uh, like I said earlier, because I had access to a very humble middle class upbringing, there is something that really stood out for me. It was very unique, like you've asked in your question. It was unique and it was challenging. I felt that it was this balancing act that women of coming from the Indian middle class, they're expected to do, this. You're expected to be a good mother, you're expected to be a good wife, you're expected to be, you must have a career, or at least now. You should be able to cook, you should be able to keep the house clean, your kids should be well raised. So all these things need to be balanced by you. The onus lies on you. And most women in the middle class, they are conditioned like that. They are raised like that, and they also try and live up to this expectation. They want to really balance it all, and I don't cut myself off from this discussion. I was a part of all of this, and having experienced that, having seen that, I felt that uh, people. So for instance, I've often been complimented that, yeah, you're a superwoman, or you so great at balancing so many things in your life. But uh, I do feel it's just very convenient uh, for people around us to put us in that box of balance. And I do feel that that is something. It's admirable. Yes, it is admirable that we are capable of handling so many things, but I also feel it's very appalling. It's appalling. Honestly, I remember my mother who's retired now, and she's spent close to 40 years in the education industry, and she's achieved her mark, and she's set her milestones, and she's been a great parent and a great social worker and all of that, balancing it all. And despite that, there have been times where I have seen her foregoing her promotions in career because she wanted to balance it. She couldn't go to another city because then the children were there. We were all young and studying. So she took that bullet. And not only her, I have seen plenty of women around me who have you know uh, either quit the job, or even if they are in the job, they have sort of not thought of progressing, or skill building. They have uh, stuck to the idea of balancing it. That I feel is, like I said, it's admirable and it's appalling. It's unique and it's challenging.
Yes, I completely agree, and I think those points are so important to keep bringing up because, as you say, yes, it is admirable, and yes, it is amazing what people can do, but what is the cost and what is the goal? Is it just to do more and to fit into more boxes, or is it to actually ask what is a actually balanced life or healthy life or fulfilling
Absolutely.
life, and what would need to be done for that to happen? Yeah, I completely agree.
Perfect. Yeah, so the last question for today. So the story of Reba Rakshit is of a woman who was a trailblazer in her field. And how do you see her legacy contributing to the ongoing conversation about women's empowerment, and what lessons can contemporary women draw from her unyielding spirit?
Well, I think what's remarkable or unusual, I can say, about her story is that she was a very successful performer in the circus ring in the 1950s and had immense success and was very, very well regarded. She made a lot of money, had a lot of famous people, sort of admire her, all of these things that were very unusual for the time. But what I think is also interesting, and actually this fits in with precisely with what Veronica's saying earlier, which is that she also was expected to be someone different as well. She was a woman in the 1950s, where that's even back so much further in time from where we are now. And so just the act of her working and her performing was both the draw, that was the draw, the reason that people came to see her. But that was also what I think inevitably was difficult for her, because in one sense she's fulfilling the audience's expectations, but in the other sense she's not fulfilling the home expectations to the same degree. And then when she has a lot of success and she's very famous, you know, that's also a double-edged sword, because yes, wow, look at this famous person, she's in the newspapers, she's making a lot of money, but on the other hand, you know, to what extent, to what is the cost to that? She's not living up to her role in the family, or fulfilling a certain image. So I think that tension is there in her story as well. How do you balance all of those things, or what loses out, and how do people respond, be it family or be it the newspapers or whomever. So I think that line that is kind of carries through her story is one that, as Veronica was just saying, is very much a part of women's lives now. So I think sometimes the recognition that some of these problems aren't, you know, problems may be harsh, problems or situations aren't new, they are things that people have always been grappling with. I think that there is some comfort we can take in that. That doesn't mean that we should try to you know, stay with it and not change it. We should, but I think there is a level of comfort when we can at least recognize these are struggles or situations that people have faced for a long time, and that they're still working to work through and to adjust. So I think that is a part of her story, but I also hope that it's a celebration of her life. Really, that was the goal for me, is that, and as I mentioned earlier too, just taking the story seriously, devoting a whole book to the pieces of her life that I could track down and put into writing. I think I feel that it's not necessarily just about one person, it's not just about her, it's about that there is someone that will take someone else's story seriously. And I think that in a sense, that's empowerment, that yes, what I am doing today matters. It matters to somebody else, it matters to, you know, to the future perhaps, and in whatever way that looks like. It doesn't have to be writing or, you know, history or anything like that, but that there's a sense of empowerment in that I think that our actions that we take matter, and when we can help sort of be in discussion with others and take that seriously, there's a sense of empowerment in that. So her story was certainly a product of its time, but also, you know, there are themes that carry on that are very relevant today too. And I hope that those themes will be drawn out, and that people can take those, maybe, you know, can think about her experience as something that they can find some resonance with.
Miss Varunika, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I absolutely like to agree on everything that you just spoke about, it, especially the part where you were speaking about celebrating. You know, it's just a celebration. The writing was just a celebration of somebody's life, you know, and the relatability factor, where somebody reading it can find comfort in you know the your work, and that is bigger than what it actually sounds, you know. There was a time when I remember, I had conceived my child, and I was on bed rest, and, you know, was going through a lot of hormonal changes and all of that. And I had another toddler at home. And I remember I was reading a book, again, a collaborative writing project, a cup of comfort for mothers or something like that. So experiences of 50 different mothers from across the globe. And I'm sure what you just said, that, the writer had written it like a celebration of somebody's life, and so for me, I found immense comfort in that book when I was reading it. And for a very long period of time, I kind of felt that, okay, this is normal, and uh, I'll get past this.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, I totally get it when you say that, that there is a sense of comfort that you find when you read a work. Uh, and I think any piece of literature, in a certain way, brings about a lot of healing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I completely agree. It gives a sense of not being alone, and having some comforts or support, whether those are figures from the past or whether those are figures now. That there is a sense of companionship that comes through with
Absolutely.
writing. Yes, I completely agree with you. Yeah.
All right, so I think that is a lovely place to end for today. And yeah, I think the main message that we can take from today's session is, as was mentioned earlier as well, when we come to a place where we don't need to say, oh, so this is a story about a woman, that is when that true sense of empowerment will be achieved for all of us. And yeah, I would just like to thank both of you for being here today, for giving in your lovely inputs. It was really nice to hear from both of you, your diverse stories and your perspectives on things. So yeah, I hope that the people who listen to this session have as great of a time listening to both of you as I did. And yeah, thank you for joining.